COVID-19 has upended countless aspects of life. That's also true for our floofy family members because pet blood donations have dipped since the pandemic began.
We've seen about a 40% drop in pet blood donations. We have several of our hospitals around the country that actually do have an active blood banking system, right? So where they actually have, these scheduled sort of drop-offs where the pets would, come in, they would donate blood, and we would kind of separate it in very much the same way it happens with people or in a human blood bank.
Dr. James Barr is a veterinarian with Blue Pearl, a network of specialty and emergency pet hospitals across the U.S. He's located in Tampa, Florida, and says people are reluctant to make non-essential trips outside, which could account for that drop.
We have protocols set up in our hospitals now where we allow this sort of curbside drop-off, where people don't have to come inside, where we can maintain social distancing. So it's safe for the pet, but also safe for their owners as well.
I'm afraid to admit I love dogs, but I never really realized that our pets need transfusions too. I mean, it makes sense, but it just never really occurred to me. So speak to me about that process.
Dogs and cats have the same sort of needs that people do when they're critically ill. It's a really common thing for us to deliver, transfusions, for either, anemic patients or patients that will need proteins in their blood or something like that. So for the same reasons that people would get transfusions, dogs would get transfusions as well. Dogs and cats and horses and cows, they all have blood types just like people do. And so we have to test for those and administer those appropriately.
I also noticed that when you take blood from dogs versus cats, it's a little different. Cats need a sedative more likely than not. Can you explain why that is?
The main purpose of that is that, they have to sit still. Cats don't want to sit still quite as well as dogs do. Dogs oftentimes are pretty well behaved. We don't have to sedate them very often. Occasionally, but not very often, whereas cats, it's really uncommon not to have to do that for cat blood donations. Obviously it's a time period that they have to sort of sit still. It usually takes just a couple minutes to be able to do, less than 5 minutes or so.
This pandemic has upended so much. And what is your bank looking like now? What happens when, 2 a.m. on Tuesday comes and someone rushes their cat in?
Yeah. It's a problem. We managed to arrange our resources such that when pets really need it, that we can kind of allocate that to the pets that need it. But our reserve is just not where we want it to be. And we're working to, sort of beef up our donation programs and kind of talk through that, nationwide. But there are commercial blood banks in which we can purchase blood from, in which we do. But we want to provide care for all the pets that happen. So we want to be able to have as good of a blood supply as we can so that we'll be able to do that.
You probably see cats and dogs the most. What are the other species that you see fairly frequently?
Cats and dogs are by far, we refer to them as companion animals, so things that are pets, right? So cats and dogs are what we see 95%. But we have exotic specialists that see pretty much anything you can imagine, from, rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, to reptiles, so, snakes, birds. And some of our exotic folks will also work with zoos as well. And so can see things like kangaroos or different things like that. So it's pretty much anything that you can imagine has been in our hospitals.
What is your advice for these first-time, pet owners and people new to this, specifically because of the pandemic?
There have been a lot of pet adoptions that have happened. It seems as if pet ownership is up across the U.S. and certainly, a lot of the world, I'm sure. The biggest advice that I could give someone is to create a relationship with a veterinarian that you trust and go to them with all of your questions about how to raise your pet, and to kind of have them be part of your house. Veterinarians are perfectly positioned to be able to give the advice that's necessary. There's lots of advice on the internet. There's lots of advice in your neighborhood, but your veterinarian probably has the best advice.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Stephanie Officer.